And the river still shines and shimmers in the light as it did in our grandfather's day, when they rode all night to fish in the morning and lived in Willapa Bay.
Yeah, and we're in the beautiful Liberty Theater in Astoria, Oregon. And if you're right, yeah, and if you're like listening in Radio Land, you can't hardly picture this, but like picture a theater that would have been at the turn of the 20th century. They spent millions of dollars, and this is the most beautiful place you could ever possibly ask to perform in, right? So congrats to the Astoria folks. Yeah. I got to say, it's one of the nicer places, and I'm not trying to brag, but I have done a lot of poetry and a lot of, I mean, I guess it is bragging. I was the Gravette 4-H Club Speaker of the Month. Only had that for 1 month because Sarah Davis, 11-year-old girl, she did a very moving presentation on treating a cow with a prolapsed uterus, and so it blew my title out of the water. But I just want to let you know, I've been big places, but nothing's like the Liberty Theater, and nothing's like the next poet that I'm going to introduce to you. This guy's been kind enough to make me a friend and accept me, gosh, over 18 years ago when a cowboy first strayed in here. He was a legend then, he's a bigger legend now. You saw the future of Fisher Poets if you saw the last set. Now you're going to see the history and the legacy. Geno Leech lives between Cape Disappointment and Dismal in Chinook, Washington. He fished the Oregon and Washington coast and was an AB on the Astoria renowned salvage chief. Welcome a legend right here, my friend, Geno Leech.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I won't preface the next poem because the title says it all. Old John Freeburg, my father-in-law. Well, he left the old country in 1926. Heard of the timber, he'd heard of the fish. Crossed the North Atlantic, worked his way to Aberdeen, a young Swede pursuing the American dream. Hired out setting chokers for the Hobie logging camp. Traded his soul for a pair of tin pants. Saturday mornings rode the speeder at Aberdeen, made a beeline for Hume Street and blew off some steam. Well, yeah, sure you betcha he could buck and he could fall. Danced on a springboard with a big fallen saw. Raised hell on Hume Street, by God he blew it all. Old John Freeburg, my father-in-law. Well, old John said goodbye to the Hobie logging camp. Started working construction, hung up the tin pants, fell in love, got married. It was time to settle down. He put out the flopper stoppers. He went rolling around. Bought an old cannery tender, the hulk left to die. John seen past the rot, had a gleam in his eye. He hewed a heavy fir keel and an oak bough stem, named it after his daughter, called her Joanne. Well, yeah, sure you betcha, what a fine little troller. She bucked through the swells and rode out the rollers. He fished salmon and silvers from the spring to the fall. Old John Freeburg, my father-in-law. Well, old John struggled and labored and dug razor clams. He shot buck deer and bull elk and lived off the land. Well, he ain't a giant, but what sets him apart? Got a barrel for a chest, a burning coal for a heart. Well, old John 92, but he ain't past his prime. We sit by the wood stove and drink early times. This is his story. I hope it lives on. I'd just like to say, Taksamika, Johan. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I got some folks living back and listening back there in Maine, a town called Bodenham. It's up north of Portland, around Brunswick. And My brother lived back there for years. He's a West Coast guy, but wound up in the service, got married at 62, you know. But anyway, he passed on a couple weeks ago, but he had a good run, man. He was 78, and yeah, they said he didn't start talking until he was about 3 or 4 years old. He just went around making noises like a truck. Guess what? He became a truck driver his whole life. But anyways, so I got his son Rick, my nephew, and family's back there, and probably listening, I hope. This next poem is going to be The Last of the Beach Draggers, and this was inspired by a guy named Morgan back there in Menemsha, Massachusetts. Menemsha, Martha's Vineyard. Had a gig back in there and got to know him. And he was getting up in years, and so this inspired this poem between he and the boat and so forth and so on. It's called Last of the Beach Draggers. Well, he slaps the kitchen floor with big bare callous feet, reloads a stained mustard-colored coffee strainer, slides the window open, a fleet of clouds race past the moon, cocks his head, sizes up the weather. One hand's a fried egg sandwich on the drive down to the boat, bottom painting a prayer or keeping her afloat. He's on the rolling black horizon before the red eastward rising sun. Last of the beach draggers, a commercial fisherman. Well sputted down in the captain's chair, worn slick by a million toes, with duct tape brown leather padded arms. He basked in the heat of a diesel stove, feet propped in dashboard clutter, gauges, gouges gloves, and buried long-forgotten Lucky Charms. Slurps coffee black as bunker sea, wags a waterlogged white owl, reads his own ancient history from an old log book. Yeah, he'll let her soak another 15 minutes, and then he'll take a look. He's sashayed down this toe since before day bloody one. Last of the beach draggers, a commercial fisherman. Well, hypnotized by a spooling bar, he winds wire in a winch, the wraps snap tight against the other. He once worked by his sons and by his brothers. He has no one astern, he has no one abeam. Pencil necks with pointer sticks have holed and sunk the fleet. The cod-end swings aboard, they sort the tow. Fishing's all he's ever done. Last of the beach draggers, a commercial fisherman. Thank you. This one's hot off the press, so I got to read this one. Yeah, I don't know. Lucky you still got a marriage going. Me and Joanne were going back and forth on this one. Jeez. Hey, man, I ain't going to Carnegie Hall. I mean, come on. Well, this is called Bartering Joe. Well, Bartering Joe never finished a trip without going home with bartering fish. Well, Joe was a dragger, and when they hauled back the sock, he could spot a bartering butsky through 2 splits of rock. Well, Joe bartered fish for any old thing, a 4-foot wolf eel for his wife's wedding ring, and scored a logging road beater for a freezer-burned king. Well, Joe bartered for all kinds of stuff, a satellite dish and half-gallon jugs, bartered a barn door skate and an arrow 2 sole for a nicotine-smelling Arctic mink stove. Well, at the galley table one night, he and the boys were choking down chicken a la king. And one asked, "What would your number one be on that bucket list thing?" Well, Joe said, I figure a bungee jump off a 4-story pickup would be dynamic, or a cigar tube adventure to the Titanic. Well, fortunately for Joe, he missed a cigar tube trip and keeps on keeping on with barter and fish. Thank you. How'd I do? I don't know. So thank God, I guess, I get to read one by memory or something here. Yeah, this is the crabbing one. I wrote this quite a while ago. It's actually half of it. This was my original, it just this half, and I tagged on some more later. But yeah, it was a tough go, you know, for some of these guys on the Washington side. They had a cannery fire at the Ilwaco Landing. Took out a bunch of tremendous amount of pots of gear they had stacked on the dock. And, you know, the Washington guys, they were going to open on the 1st of January, I guess, right in there. And but because of that, a lot of them had no gear, you know. I mean, terrible, terrible deal, you know, because they're kind of, you know, banking on an opener, you know, to maybe they got some debts going, they got so forth and so on. But guys up and down the coast from Washington, California, beyond, you know, rounded up gear for them, donated some of their own, whatever. And they got those guys going within a few days. It's totally amazing, you know. So it's nice to hear something like that in the world these days, you know, where people are going way out of their way to help each other out. So this is called Pink Orange Glow. Sodium lights, they always, to me, that was kind of their color, if you had to color them. You know, you see them off on the horizon. Crabbers use them, you know. They got them, you know, they started up in Alaska, probably in the Bering Sea or some of those fisheries, and then they started, you know, I mean, some of them, they call them Norwegian sunshine, you know. Fishing has all kinds of slang. But anyway, here we go, Pink Orange Glow. Well, she idled across a breaking bar, casting a sodium glow. The lump was 10 to 14 feet with an occasional buffalo. The crew were wedged in heaving bunks. Grime pillows drank their drool. Their clammy quilts were a patchwork stink of bait and brine and fuel. Well, the skipper's wash-rock fissured face glowed green in the dashboard lights. He'd passed more lighthouses and telephone poles. He was a hard-case, stick-and-stay guy. He slurped scalded fishboat Folgers from a varicose vein-wide mug, zippoed his umpteenth camel, and kept an eye on an inbound tug. He found a hole in the lump and throttled up a howling 6-1-10. The boat gave a buck. She banged and she rolled in ship green water again. He ran offshore and sniffed out his string, painted Norwegian green and gloss white. In foaming Black Seas buoys danced, dove, and teased in the pink-orange glow of the sodium lights. Well, the grog-cowlick crew rolled out of the bunks. The boat wallowed deep in the trough. Silent and sullen, they pulled on dank boots and questioned the lives they had wrought. Drunk with sleep on a rolling back deck, their lungs dragged in diesel exhaust, and shining like seals in moss green Helly Hansens, they meat-axe crab bait and swung out the block. Thank you.
Oh Lord, same damn river, 40 years of working, all I had to give her. Hard on my back and it won't get better, gonna put that riverboat down forever. Load up firewood and cotton, folks who got the tickets and the folks who never bought 'em. Lean against the throttle, hope we get her off the bottom. Hear that whistle in the middle of the night, forgotten.
So I'm very lucky to have Mary with us. Mary presented last night at FisherPoets Gathering. And Mary, I so enjoyed your performance. Can you tell me more about your work?
It's not really work the way I do it. They just sort of come to me and I just write them down. That's about it. And I see all these people really, really work. And I feel guilty because I'm not really, really working. But I think there's stories out there or people out there that want to be talked about or that they want to give us their stories. So I'd like to have a song about a boarding house lady up there and canneries and some women, not probably half and half, men and women, but some of the shore things as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important.
Well, Mary, you're lucky that they'll just come to you and you can share them with all of us. What would you like to share with other people about the FisherPoets Gathering and why they should come and maybe tips?
Yeah, definitely should come, and it's a great amount of fun. The weather this year is perfect. It's been snowing and icing before, but it's perfect this year, and it's just incredible history. And you have to sort of look for where stuff is because it's sort of spread out. But there's stuff in the library, stuff in probably the Maritime Museum still, I think. And down at Pier 39, there's a lot of stuff in the center part of town. It's just really great, and some of the places have food and drink as well. It doesn't get better.
Mary, anything else you want to share with us?
No, I'm just very honored to be here. I'm not really a fisher myself. The greatest respect. I've worked in fisheries research and have some, I lived in Newfoundland, so I got a lot of experience there. But I'm not exactly a fisher. I'm not at all. I would last 5 minutes on a boat and I'd be swept overseas even if it was calm.
Mary, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you.
Take care.